So you suspect your child has celiac disease. They might be showing all signs and symptoms and it runs in the family. Or maybe you've just watched my previous video and you're thinking, I need to rule celiac disease out. A lot of parents who come into my clinic and suspect their child has celiac disease immediately put their child on a strict gluten-free diet. But I believe this is not always the best way to go. What? But they feel better on a gluten-free diet. Now hear me out. Immediately putting your child on a strict gluten-free diet does not give you clear guidance and answers into what actually may be going on. While they may feel better initially, putting our children on a strict gluten-free diet forever comes with its own battles, particularly as the parent. Stick with me as I share my top 3 tips when it comes to testing for celiac disease in your child. Hi, I'm Sammy, clinical nutritionist, stepping right out of my clinic onto your screen. I'm on a mission to help families to get to know their bodies and nourish themselves while having fun. So why do I not recommend simply putting your child on a strict gluten-free diet without testing? Well, there are a number of reasons. Firstly, a lot of the symptoms associated with celiac disease can actually be related to something else. While a gluten-free diet may help initially with reducing inflammation, it's important to look further. That being said, if your child has been labeled with ASD or ADHD, I believe a gluten-free diet straight up is great to see if your child's behavior changes. Working in with a professional practitioner is important when making dietary changes. A quick disclaimer, this is general advice based on my own clinical experience, case studies, and research. We are all unique and it is highly recommended that you seek professional advice based on your child's own individual assessment. When it comes to testing for celiac disease, there are a number of things to consider, and here are my top 3. Number 1, genotype testing. I highly recommend getting a genotype test done first. This way you can test them straight away without having to wait to introduce gluten back into their diet. And the bonus is some places do this by a scrape of the inside of the cheek, which means you can avoid those needles for a little bit longer. If it comes back negative, this means your child has an extremely slim chance that they actually have celiac disease. However, if it does come back positive to them carrying this specific gene, there is a chance that they may actually have celiac disease. This does not mean that they do have celiac disease or that they're going to get it. Tip number 2, don't rely on the blood tests alone. So you have a positive gene test come back. And this is where your practitioner will then send you off for something called an antibody test. It will measure the levels of antibodies in your blood that have been produced due to the reaction of gluten present. Your child must be eating gluten 6 weeks before testing. That being said, if your child is younger than 4 years old, this test may not be very reliable as their antibodies can fluctuate. It is recommended to do the test again in a few months' time to get more of a clear result. And I use the word clear loosely. If positive, your child will then be sent off to have a biopsy of the small intestine to then confirm diagnosis by looking at the damage that it has done to that villi in the small intestine. The problem lies with when our child gets a negative test result back from that antibody testing. This does not mean that your child does not have celiac disease and then just to leave it. In fact, there are studies that have been undertaken in relation to the accuracy of that TTG IgA antibody test, the test that is used due to the high sensitivity of picking up celiac disease in almost anyone. The problem lies around the frequency of false negatives that they are seeing in relation to this test. In fact, they go as far as to say that it no longer may be useful clinically as a screening test for celiac disease. The test that is used most of the time. If you want to read more, you can check out the link to the study in my comments below. Point being, if it comes back negative and you still suspect something isn't right, don't completely rule out celiac disease just yet. If you've enjoyed the information I've shared in this video so far, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My 3rd tip, rule out everything else. Okay, so the antibody blood test has come back negative. And maybe that genotype testing also came back negative. Your practitioner has said there's no need to do a biopsy, no need to do further testing because your child's symptoms are quite mild. It's all good, but as a parent, you still suspect there's something going on with your child. And you notice that they actually do feel a lot better on a gluten-free diet. As a mother myself, we often know when our child just isn't themselves. Mother's intuition. So the third thing that we want to do is rule out everything else. There are so many other things that could be happening that are causing similar symptoms to those of celiac disease, particularly when you're looking at the gut. It could be a wheat allergy. Maybe it's not the gluten. Gluten is found in wheat, rye, barley. An antibody or skin prick test can be done to rule out whether your child has a wheat allergy. It could be non-celiac gluten sensitivity. That's a thing. While it may not involve the immune system, much like in celiac disease, it can definitely raise those anti-gliadin antibodies, which is in a response to gluten floating around in the body. There are other tests out there that you can do to test your child's sensitivity to gluten, FODMAPs. Some of you may not have heard of this, but it is definitely a thing. Perhaps your child has poor digestion when it comes to round foods with gluten in them. Eating these foods too often without the body breaking them down correctly can definitely lead to a digestive upset. What about something else? It could be the yeast. I've had children in my clinic who can't have yeast. It could be how fast they're eating their food. It could be the fact that they're running around while eating their food. So looking at their habits around mealtime. Are they having too much sugar that's causing gut issues? And last but not least, what about the chemicals that are sprayed on Australian wheat? Glyphosate. Is it a sensitivity to this? The point is, don't just ignore it. If you can see a child generally isn't thriving and you sense something isn't right, then don't ignore it. Find someone who will work in with you. And it's also important to mention there is a lot of confusion out there in the wellness world as well as scare tactics. And as a parent, we want the best for our child and we can get confused around some of the information that is given. This can build up anxious feelings in our body, and then we can start to look for all kinds of things going wrong in our children. Of course, we want them to be super healthy, but to this I say, take a breath and remember that our health isn't just what we eat. It also comes from how we move, think, and feel. Be kind to yourself. Check out my next video on what to do now that your child may have been diagnosed with celiac disease.